It's mine too. I plan on coming back. Oh, thank you. That's good. Yeah, everybody's been super nice and chill and relaxed, despite the fact that there are a ton of people here. So I hope everybody's having a good time. So we're going to introduce ourselves, and then we'll jump into this. I'm Marshall Ashton. I'm the director of the Game Art program at Lawrence Tech. I'm also a tenure track professor. So Lawrence Tech is in Southfield, Michigan, which is outside of Detroit. Also on the side, I'm an indie dev on the side. My priorities are primarily academics and my family. We just moved into a house. Don't buy a house. Oh my God. Especially around the holidays. So yeah. But I won an award or two. Taco Bell does this thing. There's actually a couple of alum here. So like if you guys haven't played Luca, check out Luca, MIVS, please. I'll let them introduce themselves and we'll get going.
Cool. I am Elisa. I am a PhD candidate in comparative sociology at Florida International University, looking at the intersection of gender and performance in Rock Band and Rocksmith. My day job is I am the new media manager at Gearbox Software and Gearbox Publishing. Made a little thing called Borderlands at one point. I happen to work for them, and I still don't know why they hired me, because I'm... and then in my spare time, what little I have, I'm a Twitch affiliate, and I broadcast Rocksmith on Mondays and do acoustic shows on Tuesdays on Twitch.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jess. I'm also a PhD candidate. I'm at Indiana University in the media school. I primarily study how video games affect people using social psychological theories. However, I do have a master's degree in media arts, thank you, in which I studied game design. And currently at my university, I work for our Center of Excellence for Women in Technology. I lead a special interest group for women in game design, and although we're not gender excluding anyone else, we do initiate a lot of programming and events to encourage women and other marginalized members of our university to get involved in game development. So if anyone has questions specific to female identifying individuals, breaking into games, networking, forming a community of that kind, feel free to ask questions about that during the talk or after.
Hi there, my name is Carl Rauscher. I'm an interactive products designer at the National Archives. I didn't start off in the game design, game development community. I actually took the long way around. And now I'm at the point where we're using games and game design in order to increase the engagement of students and visitors at our facilities, and trying to come up with ways of using the holdings of the National Archives to increase civic education across the country. What that means is I'm also one of the few people within our agency who's familiar with game design and game development, and I've had to do a lot of self-teaching in order to get where I'm at right now. So I figured it'd be a nice perspective change.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Thank you all. I appreciate it very much. So this panel topic is actually derived from a 40-minute talk that I would give, and it comes from this kind of like culmination of experience and discussion that's taken place over the last year throughout the development of a community in Michigan, which for a very long time had been very kind of stagnant. Bubbles would pop up of people trying to get everybody together, and then nothing would come out of it, drama would happen, and I'm sure some of you have seen situations like this. And things are different now. We founded an Ann Arbor IGDA chapter, and it's kind of been a facilitator for a number of jobs, both for my students and otherwise, and kind of this really interesting connecting point between all of the colleges throughout Michigan, which includes Michigan State, U of M, Lawrence Tech, Ferris, and so on, and the industry throughout Michigan, which there is one there, surprisingly. That's a misconception. So, this is primarily motivational speaking, whether you are, you've been in the industry for 20 years, maybe you were in a different industry, and now, you found yourself in games. Maybe you have nothing to do with games at all. Some of these points that we're going to be talking about are these kind of things that we have to remind ourselves constantly, whether we're new or old or whatever. So I think one of the biggest things is, as you go through school, if you go through school, you end up in the industry, you end up in academics, whatever, you're making games, you're doing things related to the creation of game development. You're always learning, right? You are always a student. And I think that we all have these stories about ways that we've had to, all right, this is what I want to do, this is my project, this is my plan. Well, how do I get to that point? Well, I've got to learn, I've got to use the skills of others, and I'm going to kind of hand this off to the other panelists and hear what they have to say about that. We are all always students.
I've been in school for the better part of my life. But one of the cool things is that I love learning. I also don't want to see my student loans yet, which is why I'm still in school. Just keep registering for classes, and you don't just keep deferring. But even in the course of those, there's that kind of learning. But then there's also, the learning that I've done in the last, year and a half at Gearbox. Just because I got my job didn't mean that I sort of stopped learning. And in fact, it is very often in the game industry, even like on the marketing side, which I'm a part of, where you, especially at Gearbox Publishing, because we're technically like a little mini startup inside a giant development building, where you are sort of thrust in a position and it's like, let's figure out how to do this. We haven't put something in a box before. Let's try putting Fortnite in a box and see what happens. Then we did. But even throughout the course of my job, there's a lot of opportunities where someone will say, hey, how about if you do this thing? And more often than not, they will appreciate I don't necessarily know how to do this, but I'm going to learn how to do this and try, and maybe fail, but learn something. In the process, I make video, for example. This is like the tiniest little example. I sometimes make video, and we released a VR version of Desert Bus recently, a few months ago, and we got so many funny Steam reviews that I wanted to make an accolades trailer, because that's what you do when a game gets good reviews, is you put all the cool reviews on a trailer, but this is for Desert Bus. So I said, yeah, I kind of want to do this because I think it would be funny. And then the head of publishing looks at my first attempt and he says, can you add explosions? At the time, I didn't know how to add explosions to stuff, because I'm still learning how to, sometimes create video. And I was like, yeah, sure. How to make explosions in Premiere. How to make explosions happen. So even though it's not like the best looking thing in the world, it is for Desert Bus, so it's kind of tongue in cheek. It's not the best looking thing in the world, but the fact is that through the process of doing my job, I learn enough stuff to make myself invaluable. And just because you get a job, that is not an end point. In fact, oftentimes it is the starting point for your education.
Yeah, piggybacking off what you've been saying about always learning, something that I've observed from a lot of the students in the game design program at Indiana University, some of the most successful students who consistently produce the best work are students who are working outside the classroom. So if you are thinking about getting a degree in game design, whether it's undergrad or graduate school, or if you're currently pursuing a degree in game design and you're a freshman or a sophomore and you're thinking, I'm halfway there, I'm almost done, the students who are getting the best work done, that the professors are really impressed by, it's the students who are working on not just the projects they need to do for their courses, but they're making extra games in addition to the games that they're working on for their degree. There's a student game development club where students can join and make games with other students on the side, and that way they can build up their portfolio more and learn new skills that they wouldn't be necessarily learning in the classroom. And I think this is true for many game design programs, is that the classes can only teach you so much. Like maybe you can have an intro to programming with C# and Unity, but if you want to get better at programming, you're probably going to have to keep making more games and just kind of, continuing to do that as much as you can. And that's really the best way to improve at anything, whether it's games or making explosions in a video, is like you kind of take the initiative to do it on your own. And we live in a wonderful era where there's so many tutorials online, and it's just a plethora of knowledge out there for us to benefit from.
I can, before Carl, if you don't mind. So I don't know a successful student or a successful, industry professional who hasn't always had a project outside of coursework or outside of work, right? So there's like a Slack group of people throughout Michigan, a Discord group, everybody throughout Michigan, and everybody's just sharing stuff, and it has nothing to do with the skins they're making or whatever, It's all new stuff. It's, I'm going to get into rigging for characters. I've never done that. I'm just a character artist. And it's really interesting because you almost see their skill level. Some things trickle down, but, these people who have been doing this for years, they're kind of starting from scratch with almost every little endeavor that they pick up from. And they're a student again, but now they're not in schools, so what do they, they end up tapping into the community around them. So that's an awesome point.
My first game, I was 8 years old, and it was a board game. The first game that I actually programmed was in Microsoft Basic, using a green monotone screen. There was no color, and you wouldn't even dream of making one in color at that time. And then Real World hit me, and I had to go out and get a job. And I couldn't find anybody who would pay me to be able to make games, let alone play them. So I ended up joining the military and took a whole different career and tack. And what I did learn there was how to work in teams, how to do project work, how to meet deadlines. Eventually I did go back to school, and I learned all the important things I should have learned immediately after leaving high school, like how to work on projects, how to meet deadlines, how to research, how to actually find things other than just trying to type it into Google and taking the first 3 things that you find, how to actually compare sources, how to find out if you're actually looking at a primary source or if you're looking at a second or third source. And when I finally got to this job that I'm doing now, they said, well, we just need somebody who can program a web app. And by then I'd been able to teach myself how to do it. And along the way they said, well, you're really interested in games. Can you make us a game? I said, yeah, I can make a game. What kind do you want to make? And they said, well, we want a board game where the kids will be the playing pieces. So it's going to have to be a really big one. And we'll get the big foam dice and we'll roll them. And I'm like, yeah, I think I can make that kind of game. What has it got to be about? And they said, well, it's going to be about 10 to 15 minutes long. And I was like, no, that's not what I meant. What's got to be about? And they said, well, can you make it about amending the Constitution? Does anybody here think that would be a fun game?
Sounds like a blast.
If you stop by, I'll give you a copy of it. We did actually come up with one, and we had to buy a big tarp and put the tape on it and put it out there. And it turned out to be an even bigger hit than we ever thought it would be. So don't believe that you can't make a game. Don't believe that you have to be a master expert at it. But I will tell you that once you start making a game, you'll follow that there's 2 rules about it. Number 1, finish it. The second rule is make a better one. And as long as you keep doing that, you'll keep getting better. Because now I'm at the point where I'm looking at college classes. How do I improve my skills? I'm looking at networking to find other people who can do the skills that I can't, because I don't have another 20 years to learn how to be a graphic artist. And I think that's be the biggest lesson I could teach anybody is, number 1, it doesn't matter what your background is, you can build a game. And 2, don't ever stop learning.
Wow, that's good. I'm glad you guys are here. And that's a really good segue, I think, into one of the other points that I talk about is, iteration is like the big word. It's like the I word, like all of my students. It's like, oh, iterate. That's right. Iteration. Because I mention it so much, and so a lot of it has to do with, okay, we're going to try to do something, but you have to have this understanding of you have no idea what is going on. You don't know. So you do the research. You look into things. You try to get to that point where you know. But even then, you don't know anything, not until you get it out in front of somebody, and then they can validate these choices, right? Things become justified when you actually get it in front of somebody else. And I've seen a lot of students who, they refuse to do it, or they've been very hesitant to put their work out there. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I think that anybody can make. If you're out in the industry and, okay, you're 9 to 5, well, 9 to 5 really doesn't, that's not really how things go, right? But, okay, so you work during the day or, latter end of the day, and you come home and, you put the kids down to bed or whatever, and you're going to work on whatever it is that you're doing until like 3 in the morning. What happens from there? If you're not showing that kind of content off, even as a vet, somebody who's been doing this for a long time, it isn't going to get anywhere, right? So you have to go through this process of, okay, I'm going to make, right? I'm going to put it out there, network, get feedback, and that's where the learning comes from, and you just keep, cycling through this process. So you had mentioned the story about the explosions, right? We have these situations where you've kind of gone through these different steps of life, right? And Jess has been interacting with students and kind of seeing all of these different ways that they've evolved and have gone through this. And project management was brought up, and I think that that's a really important thing for everybody, and it's something that always has to be exercised, our ability to work with others and the like. Can you guys talk about certain projects maybe where things failed pretty hard, and maybe...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the first games that I made for a video for the workplace is they wanted to, create a game that kids could play and that they could actually put into school that would show them how the government functions, specifically Congress, the important functions of it. And I'm thinking, how is that fun? There's no fun there. And so I started taking a look at what are the different aspects you could do, and I found one in there. They raise and spend taxes. So I'm like, raise and spend, that's a buy and selling kind of thing. You should be able to come up with a mechanism to do that. So I built it, and I put it together, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of fun. And I showed it to my boss and said, here, what do you think? And he started playing it wrong. And he looked at it and he goes, this doesn't make sense. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to work for me. We'll try something else. And he never came back to it. And it was a really, really hard lesson to take. He wasn't playing it wrong. I hadn't built it in a way that he could understand how to play it well. And so being able to take that feedback, and more importantly, don't just get feedback from friends and family, because it's kind of like when you bring that picture home from kindergarten. It's the best picture in the world, and they put it right up on the fridge.
Up on the fridge.
That kind of feedback is not going to help you make a better game.
Are you thinking about what
clearly
you can
we're
share?
flawless, so it's hard for us to. I know I can't think of any fire disasters in terms of failure, but I know that there's been a lot of struggles. I guess this is not game development strictly speaking, but building a community integrated into an existing game development program that supports specifically the people who identify as women, trying to build them up and trying to support them, has a series of challenges that, as the person spearheading that and developing that, I've at times felt like a failure. I'm not doing enough, or I'm not getting through to people. It's hard. It was initially difficult to, build up a community where people wanted to consistently come out and attend our events. When we were meeting maybe 2 to 3 times a month, and then just trying to figure out what kind of programming serves the needs of the students, particularly women, who are already a very small number in the game design program at IU, where I am. It's well, where do I find the women to even come to these events? So in that sense, I felt like a failure. But one way that I tried to get around this was to make programming that appealed to everyone, not just women or people who identify as women. It was, let's see what is missing in the game design curriculum, and because there's a lot of things missing from the curriculum. There's not really any discussions on mental health or work-life balance, which are issues in the industry. Crunch, where people have to work 60 or more hours to meet a deadline. Those are real issues that game developers face once you leave school and you get out into the workforce. So we had topics of that sort and had a lot more success because we'd have people of all genders coming out. And so trying to tie that into the discussion, I would say, if you're going to build any kind of community, whether it's for women or for anyone else at your school that's game development related, try to look at what's missing from the curriculum, because you can't teach every single thing. Like if there's no intro to programming course, maybe that's something students can teach each other on the side, and you can sort of build a community around that. When you can, because game development is very, team-based, project-based, you're working on teams, but it can also be kind of isolating. Some people tend to work like programming on alone, artists tend to work alone, and so on and so forth. But if you can try to get more events where people are learning from their peers who might have a little more expertise, I think it really helps improve sort of like a trickle down, like institutional knowledge, and just getting people who are early in the program a jump start.
I mean, that's really rough, because I've gone through something very similar, and maybe not as noble, I think, because it's just been just kind of general, everybody, whatever. But you're going through this, you're kind of learning what works and what doesn't, and you have to get people to come, right? Like, you have to build it, and then they'll come, and it's never an easy situation. And with students, I know. I've written about this, I've talked with this, and had many conversations with the students. I mean, if you're undergraduate especially, many undergraduates are out of high school and they're becoming adults, they're becoming professionals, they're becoming, really just like self-teachers, makers, really. And that's a lot. That's a lot. On top of, most of them are still kind of defining who they are, right? Finding out their own identity. This is way too much, So how do we then get them to sit in a room together and then do something about that, right? And not mess around and watch YouTube videos or talk about memes and stuff, which is totally totally cool. So, which I think blends right into this other notion of discipline. I really like. I came across this. One of my architecture colleagues showed this to the entire college. This David Foster Wallace speech that he gave, and he talks about, and this is actually like a short story and the like, but if you don't know who he is, David Foster Wallace, look him up. He gives this really interesting talk about how students, the best thing that you could do is really just learn how to think after college, right? And it's not something that ever changes. You still exercise this. You have to work on discipline. It's not something that you just attain and then that's it. It's not like a romantic comedy where the two get together and then everything is hunky-dory. Like in the sequel, they're never together. And that's how it goes. So, we end up getting into this rhythm, this cycle, this pattern where you're going to work, you're coming home. You're going to work, you're coming home. I have students who are struggling now that they are professionals, just trying to find the time and the interest and the motivation to be working on those side projects now that they've made it, And it's really the same if, 20 years from now they're in that same cycle. It's the same situation. 4 years ago when he just started off school, same thing. He's waking up and carrying out this schedule and dealing with the exact same issues. So I'll share a quick story of my own, and then you guys, I'm sure, can talk about discipline and having to fight with whether or not, okay, this evening, do I want to play something, or do I want to write, or do I want to, as game makers, I think that's all something that we can relate with. So I didn't graduate high school, which is odd because now I'm in higher education. I don't have a diploma. I failed at this. I tried to get out of high school early and then get into college. And long story short, didn't work out. And I spent a lot of time playing Final Fantasy XI until 7 in the morning. What an awful game. It was not designed to kind of help me get out of that in any way, but it was my fault. And it's something that it was a very, it was a big moment in my life where I had a grandfather who passed. I had, family that was sick, and I was like, wow, okay. The last thing that my grandfather knew about me was that I slept all day and was up all night. Like he hadn't seen me in weeks, coupled with a couple of other things. It was a really rough situation, and I think it took that like, wow, okay, you know what? I got to do him proud, right? I've got to do something, which then led to a number of other good and bad choices. But it's still something that I have to struggle with today. I mean, I'm not playing that game, that's for damn sure. But I'm glad that things have changed where I'm able to just, hey, I got an hour. You know what? Yeah, I need that outlet. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to play something. But I don't play Overwatch. I don't play a lot of the big popular games. I have to be very aware and mindful of how I spend my time with what game, because I could very well go back into this cycle of compulsion and addiction. So, yeah. Discipline.
So my program, my PhD program in comparative sociology at FIU has a 9-year limit. You have 9 years to complete your PhD, or else you get booted. Doesn't matter how close you are. I'm in year 9. Yeah, baby. Nothing like being in year 9 of a 9-year limit to put a fire under your ass. But one of the interesting things about just that whole process, right? Like, long story short, had 4 years of TA-ship that paid me a salary and paid my tuition waiver, and that was awesome. And then it took more than 4 years to get done, which meant that I had to find a real job. And once you find a real job, then the time you have to write and work on your graduate school stuff is like, so then that just automatically extends the time. And it was kind of interesting because I did not allow myself to feel too good about anything I did for enjoyment for the last 9 years, because immediately there would be a voice in my head that said, you should actually be writing though. But should you really be going to this movie? I mean, yeah, it's The Force Awakens, whatever, but like, you should be writing. Yeah, I know that this just, no, you should be writing. Hey. Constantly. And one of the things that sort of helped was, having an actual deadline, and then learning that about myself, that as soon as I no longer had deadlines for coursework, right, that I was like, oh, well, I can do it tomorrow. I got 9 years. Don't do that. Find some sort of deadline for yourself, and then also know yourself really well. It took me a while to recognize the perfect situations that I had to be in order to make work happen. I tried to tell myself, I can work at home. I can work when I get home, at home. No, my cat is very cute and likes to be on my lap where my keyboard is, and that's not great. My husband, who I haven't seen all day, is also very cute, and he's a distraction. I had to figure that out about myself. I had to figure out that I can't go to a library because it's too quiet for me. I can't work in quiet. I've tried to work after work at work, but I liked my job too much, and I just wanted to keep working on my day job instead of write. And so sort of finding that out about yourself and being honest with yourself and not trying to put a square peg in a round hole, that goes a long way to trying to figure out, like, okay, what is the best place I can be in order to make work happen? And then how do I make those opportunities available to me more often? It's almost like the same thing about like working out, right? like figure yourself out. If you keep making excuses, just eliminate those excuses. Like, oh, I don't have any workout clothes. Okay, buy the workout clothes then. Like, oh, but just eliminate all the buts. Eliminate the buts. Just print that out. But really know yourself and be honest with yourself about what it is that gets you jazzed, and then consciously make the effort to make those opportunities available to yourself as many times as possible. If that helps, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So I have another example. On the side, while I was initially teaching, I was working on this pet project. And I went to school in 2006 when the browser-based game thing was golden. That's, Newgrounds and Flash and Eagle Raptor and, Dan Paladin, Tom Fulp, and all them. That became the thing. So I was making a Flash game. I'm going to do this quick, 2-week thing as I have time in the evenings, and then it became a couple of month thing. It became a very different game. It suddenly started winning awards, and I was exhibiting it, and now instead of 2009, it's 2016, and I haven't finished a thing. And it's something that, I would work on it and get really into it, and oh my God, it was like the backbone of my master's thesis and all of this, and then the class was over, and then I stopped working on it. And it just kind of became this thing. Oh, now I have a son, and well, I got to prioritize my time and the like, and it constantly got pushed back further and further. And as the game started to get more and more popular, it could have been here at the showcase, but after it was accepted, I had to say, I'm sorry. I am very grateful for the opportunity. I would love to, but I cannot continue working on this game. And on the positive side of it, it's allowed me to kind of restructure my priorities and just do new things and not get locked in this thing. It's fine to kind of fail in that regard and know when to quit. I don't think anybody ever really knows when enough is enough. But
No.
That was a long time I was working on that game. I'm very happy to be done with it. But it's very interesting how it's become ingrained in the way that I live, because I would drive home from work and that's what I would think about. Suddenly I'd come up with this solution in my head of how to overcome this bug or to implement this feature that I've been kind of thinking about, and it would work 100%. That was just part of my process, and now I can't do that. Now this kind of stuff pops into my head, and yeah. So I want to give you guys some time to ask questions and the like, but there's one big thing, aside from networking. You guys know you should network, right?
Okay.
Everybody should, right? You've been in the industry for a while, you should be helping out the people that, are more inexperienced. If you're inexperienced, you should be reaching out, looking for mentorship, even just a simple introduction. I know many people who play games. A lot of my students, they have to break out of their shell. They're very shy. I am not outgoing myself. Pro tip, ask people questions about themselves. You won't have to be awkward or say anything. They'll keep talking, because I like talking about myself. It's a very narcissistic thing, but it's just, yeah, I'll share for sure. I have no problem doing that.
Well, it's also the one thing that you are going to be an expert at, is that yourself.
Yep.
And everybody wants to be an expert at something.
Yes. So, oddly enough, this last bit is really about just you don't want to be a jerk. You don't want to be a hater. It's not about you. So a lot of this it's kind of summed up as, you want to be somebody that if you invite them to a barbecue at your house, oh yeah, they'll go, of course. Why not? And it's not a second thought, right? I've had students who were not the best. I mean, in all honesty, their skill set was, a little underdeveloped. Maybe they didn't spend as much time working on things as they should have, but they went and talked to people, and they just asked questions and did this kind of mentorship, hey, you work at ILM, I want to talk to you and get to know what that experience was like. And That's led them to some of the biggest industry jobs that I can say any of my students have gone into, right? And a lot of that also has to do with the fact that when he goes and talks to those people, as many of the other students have, and many other vets that I know and myself do, we mentioned we don't want the family just saying, oh, I love you, oh, I'm so proud of you. I mean, if you look at my Facebook, that's all it is. Like, oh, hey, about to give a panel, and everybody's like, oh, oh, you're gonna do great. No, you're just so awesome. And it's like, well, thanks, Auntie. That's good. I don't want to discount that or discredit that at all. But I want somebody to tell me all of my stuff is crap. Like, break it down and explain why. Don't just say it's crap. Like, break it down and explain why. And at that point, regardless of my experience level, I have to be able to take that, right? Like, I can't hate on that person. I can't go, oh, well, like somebody else did that, whatever. I can't think, oh, man, no, it's not about you. This is good relationship advice, too. It's not about you. What are they trying to tell you? What was their perception of the experience that you put in front of them, right? And what can you do to improve that? And also, should you listen to them? But
I always treated it kind of like when you were in school and you turned in your test, and the teacher came back and it said, you got 3 of them wrong. Which 3? And then you start looking at it saying, okay, why was this one wrong? The feedback you get from somebody should give you that same kind of experience. Somebody says, your game sucks. I can't fix that. But if you say, the character doesn't move right, or I kept getting stuck, or I'd push the button and he wouldn't jump right away, those are all things I can fix now that I know that they're not operating the way you expected them. And if you're thinking it's supposed to do something and I want it to do something else, what did I do to mislead you? Maybe that's something I need to fix as well. Again, you're not going to get that by your aunt or your mom or your uncle telling you it's the greatest thing, or somebody just looking at it saying, this sucks because it's not Call of Duty. So as long as you understand what you can get from feedback, and then you're going to learn to seek it from everywhere. You're going to look to somebody else who's made a game, somebody who's never made a game, somebody who plays a game a lot, somebody who you wouldn't think of who plays a game, but maybe they got a really good ear for music. All these kind of things or whatever, you'd never know where that experience is going to come from, and you'll quickly get over it because you'll realize that's the only way you're going to get better is if somebody helps you find out where the spots you're missing.
yeah.
Yeah, I think being open-minded to constructive criticism as a student or even further along in your career is a great trait to have, and to be open-minded and not take it personally if someone is telling you the criticisms of your game. Obviously, if you've poured a lot of heart and time and energy into a game, it can be crushing to hear like people aren't having fun or the character doesn't move right. But ultimately, taking that feedback into consideration will improve your work. And if this is someone who is an industry veteran or has more experience than you and they have the opportunity to give you feedback on your project, definitely take it to heart and take notes. I have seen a lot of students get feedback from industry experts and they don't write it down. And it just blows my mind because you're not going to remember that a half hour, an hour later, or the next time you are working on that game, which could be days later. So if you are a student in a position who is getting some feedback from someone with more experience and more knowledge, have a notebook or in your phone, write something down. And I think it also impresses them because it shows that you are taking what they say seriously and you are demonstrating that you are a professional and you take your work seriously.
So are you taking notes?
Another piece of advice I once heard was, if somebody tells you that something's wrong, they're almost always correct. If somebody tells you, here's what you need to do to make it right, they're almost always wrong.
Whoa. Well, I imagine that making YouTube videos, right?
I get to read YouTube comments. I get the pleasure just the endorphin hit of reading YouTube comments. And then I also have experience as a community manager. And so we have a community coordinator who I work with, and so I also get to read the comments on Twitter. Gives me so much joy. And sort of like on a related, sort of kind of related point, you know, one of them, there is a difference between, you know, I don't like this mechanic, therefore, you know, you should not be on this planet anymore, and I will make that happen, and I will also find your families, and make sure they're not on this planet anymore either, which is an email we've gotten. Actually, I think we got like 2 within a week, for 2 different reasons. So it's interesting. So don't do that ever, because there are, and people often forget this, actual real life people that have to A, read that, B, care just as much about your enjoyment as you care about your enjoyment of this thing. We definitely don't. I don't think a lot of people do intentionally set out to make a crappy thing. And oftentimes it takes years, plural, working on this one thing that is their baby. And so, you know, don't be that. On the one hand, don't be that guy, especially if you are trying to somehow end up seeking employment in the same industry. I went to a school to give one of those career talks. I was not dressed like this when it happened. I came to a school, and one of the questions was, you know, to us, it's like, who's your biggest rival? Because there seems to be this opinion of, you know, just like competition between between different companies, and, you know, like they all hate each other and blah blah. Like, yeah, like every once in a while, you know, there might be a moment where you go, ah, dang it, they did that thing, shoot. But what a lot of people don't realize is that we are constantly playing other people's stuff, one, and love other people's stuff. Like, yes, there are people like Gearbox who are huge Overwatch nerds, despite Battleborn. Like you are not banned from playing Overwatch because you worked on Battleborn. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Like, I play Fortnite Battle Royale. Yes, we put Fortnite in a box, but I also want to play PUBG. Like, it's like you're allowed to play other people's stuff and love other people's stuff. That's one thing. Because we're huge nerds too. That's why we got into this in the first place. And the other thing is that the industry is very close-knit too. And the turnover is such that you never know when you might end up working for another company. And people switch companies all the time. And the industry is very small, and people talk, and it's very close-knit. So keep those bridges intact as much as you possibly can, because you never know when you might end up somewhere or not end up somewhere because of a bridge you may have burned years ago. So don't be a jerk. And you never know. You know, you can get inspiration and get feedback and get help from all sorts of people, because at the end of the day, we love games, and we want to make the coolest things possible, and we want to make the things that we want to play, and that hopefully you will too. So that's how that works.
Yeah, I think respecting the work of other devs is huge, and I think as recently as this past summer, I read online about a person who got employed by a company in the video game industry, and then the employer uncovered comments that they found that this individual had written, basically trashing the company that was going to employ him, and then decided to ultimately not hire them.
Disemploy.
Yeah, disemploy, because of comments they wrote years ago, disrespecting the company and the work that they do. So there's no reason to trash talk other developers, especially publicly, but just don't do it, period.
Don't be a hater. So as a teacher, please back up your stuff. Back up your stuff. Save off and back up your stuff. If
Just
you go to
MLS.
present and it's like, oh yeah, my flash drive. It's like, there's no reason for it anymore. That's blacklisted some people, like instantly. That's what you get when you invite industry into the classroom. And then, anyway. So, do you guys have some questions? Some comments, please? We have
questions, comments,
yeah, like
concerns?
15 minutes left. So we'll kind of start from the front and go back. So go ahead.
Sure. So, as a content creator, do you think it's important to be unified under a certain type of image or like being known for like a certain thing? And if you have a lot of different interests, is it more important to like pick one and focus and that be your image, or try to incorporate everything into that?
My brand. Branding is important, and these are kind of the things that I actually like frequently struggle with, right? You have to. There was a beautiful, very important philosopher, a drag queen by the name of Willem, who has a quote, says, "Find your niche and fill it." Find your niche and fill it. If you got a paycheck, I got a gig. There is something to be said about finding something and being very, very good at it and constantly honing it and having that be your thing. And that becomes your brand. On the one hand, it is a little bit to be like, well, maybe I should play some other games other than, rock music games or something. Or maybe I should do some other stuff and branch out at the risk of alienating your audience. It kind of depends on the kinds of things that you do. And it's a really sort of case-by-case basis. Because on the one hand, people might like you for you, and then regardless of what you're doing, they're there for you, right? On the other hand, they might go for that sort of certain content, and then if you're not producing that, they'll go. It's good to sort of iterate and kind of maybe try some things out, but I think if you've got a thing and it works, don't be afraid of trying something new, but always keep tabs on what works and what doesn't work. Even if it's something like a separate playlist, of like, oh, this is where I'm gonna do some experimental stuff. I'm gonna try some things out for a bit. We'll see how it goes. Without maybe necessarily having to like throw out the baby with the bathwater and just start up a whole new thing. Maybe there's opportunity there to experiment and branch out and put some feelers out. And you never know. You might hit on a whole new audience. But there is something to be said for having a brand and keeping it strong and keeping it consistent so that, people can rely on you like clockwork. So I don't know if any of that helped at all. Because I'm still trying to figure it out, man.
Yeah. In a general way, there's also this like notion of quality over quantity too, and this is more general and not very specific to just like, but relevant, right? And it's something you have to balance because more than likely an employer is going to want to see like one or two really solid examples of polished work over 20 just kind of iffy ones.
Yeah.
Another question? In the front, yes.
sorry. I was wondering, so I'm currently a data design student, and I was wondering, at George Mason, and one of the things I was wondering was, how valuable within the industry is to be able to point and say that you had a dedicated degree in game design?
Ooh.
Speaking to somebody who's been other than in the gaming industry, I can tell you that if I were to go to somebody and say, I have a degree in X, a lot of times just the fact that you have a degree is a very key thing. What is more important is when you go for that job, you could say, and here's what I learned getting that degree and how it's going to make me the best employee you are ever going to have in your life.
That's all that matters.
Yep.
When you tell them about the project management, when you tell them about the team building, you tell them about the creative aspect, you tell them about the troubleshooting techniques and the system engineering and all the kind of things that you've learned in order to become an excellent designer, that's what they're really looking for.
It's that content that you've created right? Outside of coursework, that I think is going to stand out. Like that said, I mean, obviously, you've gone to school for this, you can create this kind of content, but there is a lot of discussion I've noticed on some of the people that I follow on Twitter, where they're saying, okay, you know what, it may even be better to not have a game-related degree to get into the field. And I think this is just the notion of that, like, I'm kind of focusing this very particular skill set or knowledge base into a certain project. And then where does it go from there? I don't know, but there's so many facets to game development that almost everything is relevant. And as it's been said, like, anybody can make a game, so.
So yeah, and game design education is so new at the moment.
Yeah.
The majority of people currently working in the industry don't have a degree in game design. They come from a variety of diverse backgrounds, technical and non-technical. So my impression, I have a acquaintance who works in the industry as a writer. She works at Telltale as a writer, and her degree is in journalism. But she wrote a lot, and she wrote narrative stuff in her free time, in addition to writing from more journalistically and professionally. So she was able to turn that into a career in game writing. But she said, and she was pursuing a master's in game design at NYU, ultimately didn't finish because she got the job at Telltale before she finished her master's degree.
Nice.
But she said her coworkers at Telltale were just like confused by the idea that there was even a master's program in game design, because they didn't even understand what that was. But it's such a new thing. Like if you need that experience, like you need that instructional environment, it's great. But the degree is not your key to getting a job in the industry. It's basically getting a degree in game design is what allows you to make games while you are in college. So you can get your liberal arts education, right? English, history, math, etc. And then you can take your game design courses, but the skills you learn in the courses and the degree in itself are not going to be enough. It's the extracurricular projects and just the people you know and being involved beyond the classroom.
Yeah, my degree's in management studies. Nobody cares. They care about can I build a good game for them.
Yeah, and it can also vary by company. Some companies might weigh it differently. So sort of think of the places that you want to work, the positions that you want to occupy, and then see if you can find, job descriptions for those and what those requirements might be if there's a job posting. And then, and even ask around. That's the whole thing about networking, right? Is ask around and, try to find folks and be like, okay, so seriously, what do you think? But it's more about what you can show. And I think one of the cool things that you learn in school for the most part is the potentially tight deadline, rapid iteration, having to take potentially harsh feedback from someone and have to execute on it quickly. That's kind of one of the most important things that you can get potentially from an education. So there you go.
All right. Any, mini, miny, we'll go front. All right.
I was hoping you can comment a little bit on industry burnout, and you mentioned a little bit about crunch a little bit, both psychologically and workflow-wise, about how the industry operates. Like, oh, geez, we have all these assets, no one wants to use them anymore, even though we just spent like having to turn that around in half the time to meet the deadlines.
Yeah.
Those are examples that I'm just trying to apply to gaming, but that happens everywhere else in every other industry.
For sure.
But I mean, like, how has the industry been receptive to, hey, like these devs they're done, they just are burnt out, like we need new devs.
I mean, I have a couple of friends, and every now and then, it's almost like clockwork. We end up having this discussion where it's like, man, I'm done. Done. No more games. No more game development. Like, I'm just gonna play stuff, work on some stuff. I'm gonna go and do film. I'm gonna go and do visual effects.
Just gonna go.
Which, it's gonna be the same situation regardless. But it's really just like that moment, that level of frustration, and they just need to vent about stuff. And some people do. They end up going into something, or bouncing back and forth between these different things. And as it's been mentioned, game development is multifaceted, and there are so many different aspects to it. It's if oh yeah, I make games. What does that even mean anymore? Like, it could mean so many different things. You're the solo developer. You're one little piece of a much larger puzzle. It could be many things. So I think at one point I read like the average lifespan of a game developer or somebody in the industry was like, a few years, like 5 or 6 years, but that was maybe 10 years ago. So that may be outdated and either better or worse. But do you guys know anybody who's kind of burnt out? And
I know many people who burned out, but in a completely different industry. I was in the Naval Nuclear Power Program,
Oof.
and I watched a lot of people completely burn out during the 2-year course of instruction. Just to give you an example of what the pace was like, they offered a 3-week mathematics course that was like considered fundamentals. Day 1 was the number line. The last 2 days were integral and differential calculus. I watched a lot of people burn out of that, and quite honestly, it wasn't because of the stress level, it wasn't because of the knowledge level, it was because while they were stressed, they did or said something stupid. They burned a bridge, basically. And the couple of times I've seen people who have burned out outside of the military, it's always come down to that. It's the person who walks into the boss's office and says, F you, F this place, I'm tired of this, whatever. That's the only reason I ever see people ever have to leave.
I had another friend. He started up a company out of school. He got a small team together. He got funding. He did like everything an indie should do to get successful. Did a Kickstarter campaign and failed like 2,000 shy of like their goal. Right? It was rough and very hard on him. And he got press about it. Like everything was in line for him to succeed at this endeavor, and it killed it. He was done. He hasn't worked with that team, and what's really interesting, and I think is part of your question is, okay, well, like how are people receptive to this? And he had so many people supporting him and telling him, you know what, man, you got to try again. Like, we love what you were doing. We love the work that you do. Like, it's a very loving community, of support. So sometimes it just happens, and sometimes that's when they need to quit, and sometimes they come back, and sometimes they don't. But so we do have to head out of here in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, he said 5 to 10.
Oh, 5 to 10.
Ooh,
So
yay,
we had.
that's more than I thought.
Oh, now we have a couple of. Oh my God, there's a bunch of questions now. So we'll go here up front, and then we'll bounce around as we can. So yes.
As women in the industry, especially with this awesome focus on gender studies, what are some of the lesser known problems that you've had to face, and how have you addressed those?
Lesser known.
There's the very obvious ones that are
Misogyny and sexism and the like.
Yeah,
some of the ones that people don't talk about as much.
Is this in a general way or more specific to? Okay.
There's kind of like little sort of interesting things that I've sort of personally run into, and a lot of sort of headbutting. I think this is just like the thing that pops into my head, which is gonna sound weird, but like there is a certain culture in the industry around drinking that is oftentimes very off-putting. There's literally a networking event called Game Dev Drink Up. I don't drink. There are a lot of people that I know that don't drink. At industry events, a lot of times there are things like, where do you go after E3? Oh, you go to the bar at fill in the blank. You go to the bar at X. This networking event is at a bar. It's always a damn bar. Which is cool, but sometimes they don't have snacks. And sometimes it's just the booze. I'm like, no. I want food and I want music at a reasonable volume so I can talk to people. Like, what is this? So one of the sort of coping mechanisms that I've had to do, because then it's I don't drink and then I'm a woman at a bar. So I've had to develop the coping mechanism of getting a Coke in a whiskey glass with a stirrer in it so that it looks like a Jack and Coke, but it isn't. But the idea that you have to sort of develop that
Persona?
It's a facade
yeah,
even.
that whole
Yeah.
facade thing, I always found it kind of odd. And then that's just like my personal choice to not drink, but then there are other folks that like literally don't drink for either religious reasons or because they're in recovery or something, and it is kind of weird I don't think that part of it is talked about as much as it should, and like how we create certain cultures around certain things that actually can end up being more exclusionary than people think. I don't know. That was just one that came up in my head.
That's a very good point. Because I mean, we have events for IGDN and Ann Arbor, and I mean we're right next door. Where we meet is right next door to this barbecue bar place. So of course we're going to go there. And some of the students, I guess for a period of time, 21 and up, you could be there. Not all my students are over 21, and we have all of these industry people that but that's like the only place that's even open at that period of time. So that's a little bit more like circumstantial, but it's a very valid point about you need to get out there and socialize and network, and it's almost like this thing like if you don't go golfing with your work buddies,
Yeah.
it's that's a very good point. More people should talk about that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Yes, in the hat.
Me and my friends here are all seniors at our school for game design.
Sure.
And, personally, I know I find myself thinking about what I'm going to be doing when I'm done. And a lot of it has to do with where am I going to end up, what I'm going to be doing, where's my personal niche, where do I fit into the whole game design community and stuff like that. And I guess the question I'm trying to ask is, what are some good tips or good advice other than things like have a good portfolio or like networking, like something to help us seek out active individuals that are inside? Like, are there online communities or?
Yeah, research. So, what companies are around you?
Well, we live in the Philadelphia area, so there's a local community called Philly Dev Night, or they're called Philly Game Mechanics.
So, is that like the monthly game jam and everything?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I know, yeah. So, those companies in the area, get involved with them, know them. So this is not just networking. This is also just informing yourself and establishing those connections in a way where you're just like, okay, I know what they do. I know what they're working on. That's what I want to do, right? So it becomes this launching point. If there are those networking, community events, go to them. I hope you've already been going to them. Like I found that many of my students who've been involved in this year-long, community endeavor that we've been undergoing, all of them are working, and they're sophomores. And even if it's just like a small-scale thing where they're working, freelance, and it's only like 5 hours a week or something where they're doing this, and it's not a full-fledged career, it's still only possible because of that, because they were there and, oh, hey, yeah, no, I know the project that you're working on and so on. And yeah, Mars told me about all this stuff that you were doing. Oh, hey, by the way, I could be contributing to this, right? You have to connect the dots. Good luck. Good luck.
Another suggestion for you. There's going to be a lot of game-related work being done that isn't called game. So if you're looking at some place where you can put your hat down and get to work and get a couple of years of experience while you're making those connections, while you're working your way into and building your portfolio, think of the kind of employment act that's going to give you the same skill sets. Is it going to be graphic design? Is it going to be web design? Is it going to be coming up with interactive experiences? One of the things I found after taking this job here for the National Archives is there's something called the Federal Games Guild. And that is, there are several federal agencies throughout, the Washington, D.C. area who, through either their education offices or through their technology offices or through their communications offices, are trying to increase what we are able to offer people interactive online, and also in the physical spaces. So we're kind of having to learn how to be game designers without having the background in it. Those are the kind of things where you may not look at that job title and realize that that's one of the avenues or paths that you could get in. So I'm just saying, expand your horizon a little bit, and like I said, if you're going to take a job, make sure it's at least going to give you an opportunity to keep sharpening the skills you know you're going to need as you're moving forward. That's more important than anything else I can think of right now.
So, one last question. Yep, go ahead. Yes.
Okay, so I know you said networking is important, and I like to try and how I do that. I'm an artist and animator. What are like good places for artists and animators looking for like a game designer to hire them or something?
Where do you post your work?
Mainly on DeviantArt and Tumblr.
Are you engaged with certain forums and communities where people are posting work? I ask, and some of these could be kind of rhetorical, because I don't mean to put you on the spot at all. But these are questions that I answer all the time. Another pro tip: don't expect people to give you feedback. Go and give other people feedback, because what'll end up happening is you'll be on a forum, you'll be contributing to this group, this environment, and if you give, you will get. People will start to pay attention. And I mean, you may like kind of say the wrong thing here and there, but you'll overcome, and you'll be more of a voice within that environment that otherwise wouldn't have been there, right? If you just post something and expect 50 people to come in and like it and give you feedback, it's probably not going to happen, and that's okay. So try to contribute as much as you can, and people will start to pay attention. And it'll also help you grow, because this will be a way for you to critically analyze the work that everybody else is doing and so on.
Another thing to consider, there's a lot of nonprofits and local grassroots organizations who are desperately trying to connect with somebody who can do some of the graphic artwork and that kind of design, even if it's for their little posters or whatever. It's things that will help you build your portfolio and exposure. And at this point, I think that's something that you really need to do, is how can you build up that portfolio?
Yep.
And I know we've kind of talked about networking to death, but you'd be surprised by the amount of activity on Twitter
Yeah.
in the game dev community. There's hashtag game dev.
Oh, yeah.
There's so many conversations, and people have back and forth threads about best practices or things to avoid putting on your resume, or things to avoid in your cover letter. All kinds of tips and tricks that you might not find elsewhere. So I highly recommend Twitter. Follow the game devs you're interested. Follow the game artists that you're interested.
Yeah.
Many of them have like thousands of followers, and they often post a good deal of advice.
Yeah, that's how they ended up kind of branching out and getting as many followers beyond just the awesome stuff that they do. If anybody's interested, there is like a Michigan Discord, and people are posting stuff all the time, students and devs, whatever. If you want in on that, come and talk to me. I can get your information, and I can email you a link to that. Alternatively, I know there are a lot of artists throughout the world that have these Discord and Slack servers where they're just like, hey, come on in, and we're going to talk about art, and we're going to talk about code, and we're going to talk about games, and how we can make them better and make ourselves better. Be a part of that. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
Cool.
just keep at it. All right, so thank you to my panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having
I
us.
love you. Awesome. And thank you guys for coming.